Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Theresa May has been forced to sack her closest political ally and lifelong friend from the cabinet. The Prime Minister asked Damian Green to resign as First Secretary of State after an investigation found he'd made inaccurate and misleading statements about what he knew about alleged pornography on his computer. Mr Green has apologised for his conduct, and his departure means Theresa May is now looking to replace a third minister in under 2 months. Sky's political editor Faisal Islam has this report.
The Prime Minister's close friend, confidant and de facto Deputy Prime Minister Damian Green has resigned after being asked to by the Prime Minister following an investigation into his behaviour. He's the third Cabinet Minister to resign in 6 weeks after Sir Michael Fallon and Priti Patel's return to the back benches. The PM met with Mr Green this evening after 2 civil servants looking at all the evidence judged that Mr Green had breached the Ministerial Code of Conduct, specifically by making misleading statements in November about a decade-old police investigation that revealed pornography on his parliamentary computer. In an exchange of letters, the Prime Minister expressed that she was extremely sad to be writing this letter. She said she shared concerns about the conduct of police officers who searched his office in 2008. However, both civil servants reviewing the evidence said his statements on the 4th and 11th of November on what he knew about the police finding pornography on his computers were inaccurate and misleading and a breach of the Ministerial Code. In his reply, the now former First Secretary said that he apologised for the breaches. He said that he was clear that he did not download or view pornography on my parliamentary computers, but I accept that I should have been clear in my press statements. He added he deeply regrets the distress caused to Kate Maltby following her article about me and the reaction to it.
That is 3 cabinet resignations in a small period of time, challenging enough for any government, let alone one with these challenges and one without a majority. But Damian Green towers above the other resignations, the pivotal key ally to the Prime Minister, trusted to run various cabinet subcommittees, including some of the negotiations on Brexit with the devolved administrations. He will be very difficult to replace, not just in cabinet, but personally for a Prime Minister with a multitude of challenges.
Celebrities.
It was an article by journalist Kate Maltby that sparked the investigation into Mr Green, which expanded into other areas and allegations. Her family tonight released a statement saying they were not surprised that the inquiry found that Mr Green had been untruthful as a minister. Mr Green spoke about getting on with the job of First Secretary just last week after key Brexit talks with the devolved administrations.
Well, you'll understand I can't comment until the inquiry outcome is completed. But what I can say is that, just like today, people will see me getting on with the job as First Secretary. One of my important roles is to negotiate the devolution aspects of the Brexit deal with the devolved administrations, and that's what I'm doing.
He was a pivotal ally to the Prime Minister in Cabinet, an ex-Remain advocate running many of the key Cabinet committees. For now, the Prime Minister has lost her key lieutenant. Her team said she had no choice, but it's a huge blow at an already strained time. Faisal Islam, Sky News.
And we can get the very latest on this now from Sky's chief political correspondent John Craig at Westminster.
It's a very serious blow, but one, of course, that she's probably been half expecting for the past few weeks, because this all goes back to early November. And, of course, it's some of the statements that Mr Green put out to the media, one on the 4th of November, one on the 11th, which have landed him in trouble and led to his resignation, because that is the breach of the Ministerial Code. He has his supporters in Parliament. One of his close friends and allies is Andrew Mitchell, who you remember had his own problems with the so-called Plebgate row. Mr Mitchell has told Sky News these 2 admitted breaches of the Ministerial Code, that's the 2 statements, are dwarfed by the extraordinary behaviour of the police which fortunately is now under investigation by the proper authorities. Well, of course, this is a blow coming at the end of a term when the PM was rather hoping to go out on a high before the Christmas break. She had an upbeat performance at Prime Minister's Questions, got loud cheers from Tory MPs as she was very combative against Jeremy Corbyn, and then survived, you could say, a 2-hour grilling from the Liaison Committee of MPs. That's the MPs who chair all the select committees. But it has been suggested that to be in between PMQs and the Liaison Committee, it was then that Mr Green's fate was sealed, and she sat through that Liaison Committee meeting knowing already that Mr Green was going to have to go. She has sacked him, there is no doubt about that, because in her letter to Mr Green, she ends by saying, "I asked you to resign from the government and have accepted your resignation." Now, will she appoint another First Secretary of State? Remember, this was a post she created after the June election. She doesn't have to have a Deputy Prime Minister or First Secretary of State, but somebody's got to do all the work that Mr Green was doing, chairing all those committees, liaising with the devolved governments in Scotland, Wales and so on. So it's left a huge hole in the cabinet, and probably because of the timing of this, she will now take the Christmas recess to reflect on how she's going to rebuild her cabinet. There has already been talk of a New Year reshuffle. So this has probably bought her a little bit of breathing space. She will have known there was always a chance that Mr Green was going to have to go, but it's still a very serious blow and has really rocked the cabinet, because this is now 3 in 6 weeks, including the big posts of Defence Secretary Sir Michael Fallon and now the man who was Deputy Prime Minister in all but name.
John Craig there.
Prime Minister Theresa May has sacked Damian Green as First Secretary of State amid claims that pornographic material was found on a Commons computer in 2008. The Prime Minister expressed deep regret at Mr Green's departure, but said his actions fell short of the conduct expected of a Cabinet Minister. Alex Forsyth has this report.
Side by side yesterday, the Prime Minister and her close ally Damian Green, her deputy in all but name. But hours after they sat together in the Commons, he was sacked. It stems back to this police raid on Mr Green's parliamentary offices 9 years ago. Officers said legal pornography was found on computers. Mr Green has always and still denies that it was his, but he also said he hadn't been told about it, and that wasn't right. He's now admitted police lawyers talked to his lawyers in 2008 and police raised it with him in 2013. And he said, "I apologise that my statements were misleading on this point. It's that breach of the ministerial code that cost him his job." There were also claims from this Tory activist about inappropriate behaviour by Mr Green. Her account was said to be plausible, but there was no clear conclusion about what had happened. Mr Green apologised for making her feel uncomfortable, but denied wrongdoing. In a letter to Mr Green, Theresa May said she was extremely sad at having to write regarding his resignation. She's lost a long-term friend and confidant from her cabinet table. But some said her decision showed strength.
I don't think it's damaging to the Prime Minister at all, really, because she's made the decision. You know, it says something about her that even if somebody is a close ally, that she's prepared to make a decision and urge him to take the decision himself to step down. And in doing that, I have to say that shows that she is not prepared to cover for somebody if she feels that they didn't answer the questions as they should have done.
Nonetheless, the Prime Minister will no doubt feel the loss of such a trusted ally from her top team. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's talk to Norman, who is at Westminster, of course. How damaging is this for Theresa May, then?
Well, Mrs May has lost a third cabinet minister in the space of, 8 weeks. She's lost her closest political ally. She's lost a number 2 in government. Of course it's a blow. But, honestly, she really had no option, because Mr Green is pretty much banged to rights when it comes to the ministerial code. He lied, and if you lie as a minister, it's almost always goodbye. And if she hadn't sacked him, then inevitably she would have faced accusations that she was putting personal friendship and loyalty ahead of an independent inquiry. There would have been question marks about her political judgment, and I suspect many of those who are angry and anxious about all the abuse allegations at Westminster would also have been on the warpath, because although the inquiry made no judgment about the claims by the political activist Kate Maltby that Mr. Green had behaved inappropriately towards her, they nevertheless describe her evidence as plausible. And one kind of final thought, Vic, you can see how Team May might seek to present this as the PM being resolute, determined, ruthless, unsentimental, showing leadership, and in a way try to fashion a narrative which suggests this is Mrs. May kind of getting on the front foot, showing she's prepared to set out a leading course. But it's a blow, yes, of course it is, but I can see how she can find a way through this.
Thank you very much, Norman. Thank you. Well, let's talk now to Sebastian Payne, political leader writer at the Financial Times. Hello to you.
Good morning.
Let's talk about the implications for Theresa May first of all. What sort of a hole does this leave in number 10?
A pretty big one, actually, because even though First Secretary of State is not a position that's always filled, it's effectively, as you said, Deputy Prime Minister in all but name. Damian Green sat on 9 sub-cabinet committees. These are the crucial policy-making committees that dictate, how things are done across government. Their whole
and also would mean that on those committees, he's her sort of eyes and ears.
Precisely.
Presumably.
And don't forget, Damian Green and Theresa May go back a long time. They were university friends. They entered Parliament at the same time. They rose through the ministerial ranks at the same time. So for her, it's a really big loss. Obviously, Margaret Thatcher once infamously said everyone needs a Willie, a reference to Willie Whitelaw, and Theresa May has just lost her Willie, and there's not another obvious one sitting there in the government waiting to fill it. And so how she gets another First Secretary of State who she trusts, confides in, and can be her eyes and ears is not an easy task, and I don't think we should expect to have another one too soon.
Right. He was the architect of his own downfall, though. He lied. It's
pretty simple as that obviously this all began with the allegations by Kate Maltby you were talking about earlier, and the investigation wasn't able to decide, but said that what she said could be plausible, and she did bravely speak out about these claims and had somewhat of a backlash in the press because of it, and that's partly why we haven't heard from her since this broke. But I think the key thing here is that if you're going to be minister, you have to be honest, you have to tell the truth, and Damian Green simply broke that. But there is this sense of sort of sadness across the Conservative Party this morning, because people feel that generally he's acted very well, and it's said that, in the investigation, that aside from this incident...
Apart from the lying,
that he had been a good minister and a good Deputy Prime Minister in all but name, but there was really no option. He did absolutely have to go once he'd broken the ministerial code. It's pretty straightforward.
Why did he say in his resignation letter, I regret that I've been asked to resign? Does he not really believe he's done anything wrong?
Well, he very much wanted to stay on here because I think he was sort of feeling there might be some kind of, I don't want to say witch hunt, this idea that there was a big media storm over this and the clear facts weren't being heard here. But he really did try to stick on and made it very clear. Don't forget David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, said if Damian Green goes, I'll go. We've not heard from David Davis. I don't think he's going to be resigning this morning. But there was clearly from Damian Green and his allies an insistence that everything must be done by due process, and on the key allegations that brought this whole thing into the public light from Miss Maltby, he didn't feel he'd broken those at all. So that's why there's that sort of tinge of regret to his resignation letter. But as I was just saying, there was no other choice when you're a minister and you lie.
How did the police come out of this?
Not terribly well, I don't think. That the leaking about this 2008 thing is all a very messy scandal, all to do with when the police raided his parliamentary computer when he was a shadow Home Affairs spokesman for the Conservative Party, and it was seen to be somehow politically motivated. And this idea that retired policemen are leaking to the press with, private information from 10 years ago, I feel very uncomfortable about, and a lot of Conservatives do too. And I don't know if there's a need for an investigation into what the police have done, but it certainly feels a bit uncomfortable that they're sort of waging this war against Damian Green that started on an entirely different topic to do with all the sexual harassment allegations that were going around Westminster a couple of weeks ago.
So how does this leave Theresa May at the end of what has been one heck of a year for her in terms of highs and lows?
A bit less happy than it was, because they've actually had a pretty good month for the government. They got that very difficult budget through. They got sufficient progress on the Brexit deal, and it looked as if things were beginning to pick up momentum. There was even talk of a reshuffle in the new year. That's certainly going to have to happen now because they need a new Cabinet Office Minister. But I think for Mrs May, it does leave the year on a sour note, and I think they will try and put this behind us. Don't forget it was released at 8:40 p.m. last night, so very much getting it out the way before she's off to Poland today. But I think they'll try and leave this behind them, and in the new year, bring in some new faces to the government and have a reshuffle just to try and bring back some of that political capital they were building up.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Thanks for coming.
Let's talk about this chap, should we? It's our top story today, and the political fallout from the Damian Green affair. What has it done to the Prime Minister's authority? Joining me to discuss this is Harry Cole, Westminster correspondent for the Sun newspaper, George Eaton, political editor of the New Statesman. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you both. Ooh, who should we start with? Let's start with you, Harry, because you were late. You weren't really. Talk to me about what you think the impact of Damian Green being biffed is going to have on the Prime Minister's authority.
Well, obviously, no Prime Minister wants to lose 3 cabinet ministers in 2 months. However, in a weird way, this story's been sort of rumbling on for so many weeks now that the timing for Theresa May couldn't really be better. She's going to have to lose a close ally, a key lieutenant in her team. Doing it 24 hours before Westminster packs up for Christmas is probably about the best possible time she could do it, because she's not going to be hauled before the Commons. She's not going to be kind of expected to answer lots more awkward questions about this. People are going to go away, come back in a couple of weeks, and, you know, she just, like she always does, just sort of seems to carry on.
George, perfect timing for the Prime Minister.
I don't think there's ever perfect timing to lose your closest cabinet ally, but it is true that Theresa May is in a stronger political position than, say, she was after the disastrous Conservative conference. They got through the budget, they've got through to the second round of the Brexit negotiations, but it is humiliating to lose a 3rd cabinet minister and for lying over pornography on his computer. But this is an opportunity for Theresa May in the new year to carry out a refresh of her team, which Tory MPs have wanted for months, bring in more of the new intake, clear out some of the deadwood and try and reboot her premiership. Because although she's got to the end of the year, she's survived, that's quite a low bar to clear. Let's remember that at the start of the year, she was hoping to spend several terms in Downing Street. No one thinks that's going to happen now.
Not straightforward as that, though, is it, Harry, in that she now has to think about Brexiteers, who's going to be able to help leading up to 2019 and indeed beyond. So she's got to remain a Brexiteer into account as well and try and balance that.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, for a Prime Minister who has a shelf life, and Theresa May does have a shelf life, I don't think there are many people that really expect her to fight the next election. The reshuffle is really the last throw of the dice she's got. She's got that as a stick to hold over people. Because in every reshuffle, David Cameron found this particularly, Margaret Thatcher found it as well, in order to allow some space to get rid of, to bring in some new faces and some fresh talent, you've got to clear out some people who really quite like being ministers and don't want to get fired. So she's kind of been forced into having the reshuffle probably earlier than she probably would have liked to. I think perhaps, you know, ideally she could have been eyeing a date around springtime, perhaps after the local elections, which aren't expected to go very well for her. And instead she's going to have to be sort of forced to play one of her final cards, really, in terms of keeping her party together in discipline. If I was her, and I suspect I'm not the only one that's thinking this, and I've heard it from a few people today, is that she might not even bother replacing Damian Green as First Secretary of State. She's got to bring someone in to run the Cabinet Office, but that was done previously by Ben Gummer, the Minister who wasn't First Secretary of State. And Damian Green's use for her was in June, when she was at her lowest ebb. She was hanging on by her absolute fingernails after that election wipeout, and she needed someone in there to beef up her team. Half of her aides either became MPs or were sacked after the election, so Downing Street literally was half empty in June, and so she needed some big beasts around her then. I reckon she could probably now manage with a team, a more traditional team, without that sort of significant power base within the Cabinet Office that she created because she was so weak.
So she doesn't, George, she doesn't need a Prescott figure. We don't often see or always see a Deputy Prime Minister, do we? And, you know, if she waited, if she didn't have a reshuffle in as soon as we get back from the Christmas break, if it was, you know, maybe Easter time, Who knows what might happen with Damian Green by then? It wouldn't be the first time we've seen a cabinet minister come back.
Well, Peter Mandelson came back, so there is a precedent there. He also had to resign near Christmas in 1998. And yes, I mean, given the speed with which cabinet ministers are leaving Theresa May's government, she might be wise not to appoint another deputy simply because they then become target number one for the opposition and the media. And if she replaced Damian Green with a Remainer, say Jeremy Hunt or Amber Rudd, that would risk antagonising the Brexiteers further. But Theresa May does seem an even lonelier figure today. Damian Green's widely described as her closest cabinet ally. On bad days for the Prime Minister, he sometimes felt like her only cabinet ally. Theresa May is rightly described as not the clubbable type. She doesn't have many genuine friends and allies in that cabinet. And yet she is surviving for want of a better alternative. And in some ways, the weaker, the worse her position appears, the less desirable the job of Prime Minister becomes. So I think she's got a reasonable chance, despite a calamitous year, of getting through 2018 as well.
Oh, let's see. Let's play the name game, should we, Harry? So, Mr. Hunt, for example, you know, he's a stalwart, isn't he? Or Amber Rudd, she's increasingly seen as a safe pair of hands.
I'd say that Amber Rudd is probably, given how clear she's made her leadership intentions of her own, and given how hard she's working to preserve her 300 majority down in Hastings, would probably be happy staying just where she is. She's quite a divisive figure. I think it would be definitely thumbing the noses to the Brexiteers if she was promoted. She's one of the sort of seen as one of the greater liners in the cabinet. People who want to, for the sake of security of the economy and jobs, wants to stay as closely aligned to Brussels red tape as possible. Whereas some of the more sort of vocal members of the cabinet are more willing to diverge to take the most of Brexit. So I think Amber Rudd would be a brave decision. William Hague is a name that's being thrown around as a sort of replacement big beast for Theresa May, but he has made it very clear on a number of occasions he does not want anything to do with it. Jeremy Hunt, very useful where he is at the NHS. He has got through years and years and years of battles with nurses and doctors and unions. And he hasn't been taken out there. I'd be a brave Prime Minister that decided to take out a safe pair of hands in one of the most, if not the most sensitive and important departments. That they need a front-facing person who can get through scraps without antagonising, millions of public sector workers.
So it's a game of really. You just tell me people we can't have as opposed to people we can. We're out of time, guys. But really, really quickly before I let you go, George first, and then you, Harry. What about the elephant in the room? Obviously he isn't, but let's describe him as that. Boris, what's going to happen with him? He's going to stay as Foreign Secretary?
I think so, although I think if this big reshuffle does take place, it would be wise to move him to a different brief. Business is being mentioned. That would suit his talents better.
Okay.
Everyone always feared that he would be a sort of gafferholic, and that has proved the case.
Okay. A quick thought from you, Harry?
Boris Johnson very successfully ran London for 8 years. Maybe a super business department, maybe merge transport into a giant infrastructure project, growing department. If you're going to move Boris Johnson, you've got to move it. It's got to look like a promotion. And there's only one way of doing that. That's making him a new job.
Okay. Oh, very good. It's great to talk to both of you. Merry Christmas. Thank you for taking the time to join us on Sky News this afternoon. Really appreciate it, both of you. Thank you.
Theresa May has joined several Tory MPs who've been questioning the conduct of the retired police officers involved in pornography allegations against her deputy Damian Green. They revealed that pornographic images had been found on his Commons computer 9 years ago. Last night, the Prime Minister sacked Mr Green after he admitted making misleading statements about the affair, though he denies viewing or downloading the images. As John Pienaar reports, the loss of Damian Green adds yet another challenge to what's been a year of political turmoil for the Prime Minister.
Sacked not for a crime, but a cover-up.
I'm not going to say anything. Have you let the Prime Minister down, Mr Green?
He still denies behaving inappropriately towards a young journalist, denies viewing pornography in the office years before, but when he denied knowing anything about the porn, he was found to have been dishonest. His cabinet career is over. Theresa May was on duty in Poland today. She believes in duty, even when it means sacking her most trusted friend in cabinet. Even if, as some MPs believe, the ex-policeman who found the pornography betrayed their duty by going public. And if they did, she says they should answer for it.
I share the concerns that have been raised across the political spectrum about comments that were made by a former police officer, and I expect that issue to be properly investigated, to be taken seriously and to be properly looked at.
But Damian Green's fate is settled. Today, tweeting good wishes to sympathisers, he said, "I'm overwhelmed by the number of friends, colleagues on all sides and constituents who sent supportive messages. Thanks to all. Happy Christmas." This was the fateful moment caught on camera 9 years ago. Police investigating Home Office leaks raided Mr. Green's office. The raid was criticised, but officers also found pornography. When that came out, Mr. Green called it a lie, a smear. The commander at the time, Bob Quick, is demanding a retraction, consulting his lawyers. But London's police chief has now referred the disclosures to the Information Commissioner.
We are disappointed to see that it appears that former colleagues have put into the public domain via the media material that they appear to have had access to as part of a confidential investigation.
At Westminster, Tory MPs generally accept Damian Green had to go, like it or not, and some don't like the way former officers behaved.
I think they should be investigated for misconduct in public office. That's a criminal offence. I think what they've done is completely wrong. It undermines trust in the police. How can any of us, trust giving information to the police if senior officers leak in this way?
In the Cabinet, David Davis warned Downing Street 3 weeks ago not to punish Mr. Green on the say-so, as he saw it, of former officers with a grudge. But he's accepted the sacking too. And the other allegations? A young journalist, Kate Maltby, complained of inappropriate conduct, and those claims were called plausible, though the inquiry could reach no verdict. So on goes Theresa May, her old friend and colleague missing from the picture. She needs allies in Europe and at home, and she's lost the closest one of all.
And we can talk to John in Westminster now. John, we seem to be lurching from one crisis to another. Where does this latest one leave Theresa May?
Well, George, no Prime Minister can lose such a close senior colleague without feeling the loss. And Damian Green will be missed badly by Theresa May. Problems ahead, no majority in the Commons, Brexit to deal with, a cabinet with differing ideas of post-Brexit Britain around the cabinet table, finding a replacement with the same authority and loyalty, with no ambition for the top job, with the ability to reach across differences of opinion. That won't be easy and may turn out to be impossible. Theresa May will hope to move on from this, not just the loss of Damian Green, but the whole story about personal misconduct at Westminster. And tonight we've learned that a junior Trade Minister, Mark Garnier, has been cleared of misconduct. He was accused of using inappropriate language towards a parliamentary secretary and on one occasion asking her to go and buy sex toys. Well, he apologised. Theresa May wants to draw a line. The pressure for higher standards at Westminster, that won't stop. And of course, the big political problems still lie ahead. But Theresa May can congratulate herself on one thing. She's still there. And that's something that a few people at Westminster weren't completely convinced would be the case just a short while ago.
John, thank you very much.
The enforced sacking of Theresa May's closest political ally represents the loss of her third cabinet minister in recent weeks, and it raises the prospect of yet another reshuffle. Damian Green's departure last night caps what is a notable drain of senior figures from her government. But today, the emphasis was all on how the police finding pornography on Mr. Green's computer came to be leaked. The Prime Minister, speaking in Poland, says she expects the leak to be properly investigated. Angus Walker reports.
Leaving home this morning after being forced to leave the government.
I'm not going to say.
I won't be saying anything, he told reporters.
Why did you lie to the public, Mr. Green? Have you let the Prime Minister down, Mr. Green?
The official inquiry answered those questions. Yes, he lied, and the Prime Minister had to sack him. Visiting Poland today, the Prime Minister was left facing the music, losing 3 cabinet ministers in 7 weeks, having to force her close friend and political ally to fall on his sword. Nothing to be proud of. And when asked about Damian Green's downfall, Theresa May was only too keen to suggest certain police officers also had questions to answer.
I share the concerns that have been raised across the political spectrum about comments that were made by a former police officer, and I expect that issue to be properly investigated, to be taken seriously and to be properly looked at.
This is currently a scene that we're going to search.
It was 2008 when Damian Green's office was raided by the police. Back then, he was Shadow Immigration Minister. Detectives were hunting for the source of a leak within government. Officers found pornography on his computer during the raid. Police say they informed Damian Green's lawyers at the time, and then informed him personally in 2013. In November this year, Mr. Green is accused of making unwanted sexual advances towards a journalist. The Prime Minister orders an investigation. When the story about the pornography on his computer then emerges, Damian Green denies he was ever told about the discovery by the police. That denial was found to be misleading and inaccurate, and he was sacked.
We have made a referral to the Information Commissioner's office.
The Met Police Chief today confirming that the Information Commissioner will investigate former police officers involved in the raid on Damian Green's office, amid talk of a plot to bring down the politician.
The fact of the matter is that when police investigations go on, the public have every right to trust that what is found, the evidence is kept confidential. So yes, I do think that the police have questions to answer, but I also recognise that two wrongs don't make a right.
The Prime Minister marches on, but more isolated than ever, without her most trusted friend at her side.
So, Angus, the Prime Minister then ending the year facing the prospect of another potential reshuffle.
Yes, as MPs head home on their Christmas break this evening, many of them may well be asking just how did Theresa May make it to the end of the year? After all, she lost her majority in a snap election. She's lost 3 cabinet colleagues. She lost a vote in the Commons on Brexit the other day. Many may make the assessment that she's staggering into 2018. In the last few minutes, we have heard from Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary. He's praised Damian Green and also put his weight behind this Tory attack on former police officers, accusing them of a vendetta.
I have to say, I think, speaking for many people, I thought it all looked a bit odd that this stuff should come out in the way that it did, and I certainly hope that it wasn't some kind of vendetta against him.
And there must be a sigh of relief from Downing Street when it comes to the prospect of a reshuffle in early 2018, that she's not going to have to replace another minister. The Trade Minister, Mark Garnier, cleared this evening of breaching the ministerial code after he was accused of inappropriate behaviour. The Prime Minister considers a line should be drawn under the issue, says Downing Street. Well, I think she might also want to draw a line over under the last 6 months.
Angus Walker at Westminster, thank you.
Theresa May has repeated her concerns about police conduct after sacking her first Secretary of State, Damian Green, for making misleading and inaccurate statements about the discovery of pornography on his Commons computer. The Prime Minister said she expected a proper investigation into claims that information was leaked by a former senior officer. Mr. Green has continued to deny what he called unfounded and deeply hurtful claims that he downloaded or viewed the material. Our political correspondent Michael Crick has this report.
This morning, Damian Green had nothing to add. He was sacked last night after conceding he misled people last month in saying he knew nothing about allegations by retired police officers that they found pornography on his Commons computer. Though he still denies he downloaded or watched porn, he admits police had talked to his lawyers about this twice in the past. Today he had to drive his own car. Only yesterday he was laughing with Theresa May at question time.
In one sense it's sad, but what did he expect? I mean, it may have been disgraceful for the police to have this little vendetta about him, about whether he had porn on his computer, but the reality is, if he wasn't prepared to admit it, if he wasn't prepared even to admit that he knew the police thought they'd found it, then, you know, he's caught out in a lie, and the ministerial code makes it clear that ministers cannot get away with lying, so he had to go.
Theresa May went to Poland today, which won't please other EU states who are at odds with Poland over political appointments to their judiciary. Having sacked her ally and effective deputy, Mrs May made clear the police were also wrong to leak.
And as I said in my letter to Damian yesterday, I share the concerns that have been raised across the political spectrum about comments that were made by a former police officer, and I expect that issue to be properly investigated, to be taken seriously and to be properly looked at.
Based on trust of auditors.
Damian Green went surprisingly far for someone who in the 80s was one of the founding journalists on this programme.
On the day, they'll be as sick as parrots, but if the £3 million does come rolling in easily, they'll be over the moon. Damian Green, ITN, Tokyo.
He became an MP 20 years ago after beating both David Cameron and Theresa May for the Tory selection in Ashford. Since June, Green has effectively been Deputy Prime Minister, chairing 8 of the 20 cabinet committees, Deputy Chair of 3 more, including the crucial Brexit Committee, which now loses one of the most pro-EU ministers of all.
Damian was undoubtedly a source, and will continue to be a source, of moderation, I think, in this debate. But that's not to say that there aren't other people who are also sources of moderation in the debate, and I don't see, therefore, that his departure is going to make any real difference.
But on the Brexit Cabinet Committee, there's one less ex-Remainer, and the balance is only 10 people on the committee.
The Prime Minister is going to have to fill that slot. May well be, as Christmas is coming, the sensible thing to do is to leave things over Christmas and have a chance of reflection in order to make what she sees as the right decision in the new year.
Having also lost Cabinet Ministers Michael Fallon and Priti Patel this autumn, and her 2 closest advisers just after the election, the load on Theresa May is all the greater. Yesterday, MPs of both parties urged her to spread the burden. For her health's sake, said one.
But you don't have to do everything, Prime Minister.
I have to say, I think, and I hope the female members of the committee will agree, that women are pretty good at multitasking.
Yeah. There are limits even to good multitaskers.
After this overseas trip, Mrs May must now decide how, post-Green, to restructure her government, with perhaps promotions for several junior ministers.
Well, the intriguing question is just how important Damian Green was for Theresa May's government. First of all, I think it's a bit of an exaggeration for people to say they were close friends. Theresa May doesn't really have close friends in politics. Allies, yes, but quite how it worked, there are 2 schools of thought. I was talking to one senior MP today, a Brexiteer, who was expressing quiet satisfaction that Green has gone, because in his view, Green was probably the most pro-European of all the ministers, and very effective at using the powers of Whitehall, the levers, to make Brexit more soft. On the other hand, the Green camp will argue that since he took this job, Green had set aside his pro-European views to act as a conciliator within government between the parties, because, interestingly, he's somebody with close friendships with Brexiteers such as Chris Grayling and David Davis. So now Theresa May's got to work out a way to replace him. She'll be relieved, I think, to have heard today that her junior trade minister, Mark Garnier, has been cleared of any breach of the ministerial code. You'll recall he was accused of getting his secretary to go out and buy sex toys.
Michael Crick in Parliament. In a moment, I'll be speaking to Lord Heseltine. But now I'm joined in the studio by Rosamund Unwin, a journalist for the Evening Standard and a co-founder of The Second Source, a group of women journalists campaigning against sexual harassment. She also happens to be a friend of Kate Maltby, and a text conversation between the pair was handed over to the inquiry into Damian Green's conduct. Rosamund Unwin, I know you've been speaking with Kate Maltby. I mean, it's been a pretty grisly time for her. How is she tonight?
Well, I think the whole thing's been pretty horrific for her, to be honest. She has endured something that's obviously been incredibly public. It's difficult enough to come forward and make an allegation against anyone, let alone the de facto Deputy Prime Minister. So it's been very, very hard on her. I think she's glad that it has been resolved. And I think the inquiry obviously did say that they considered her a plausible, her story was plausible. But I think she's slightly been left in a limbo where, of course, they say, well, 2 people have very different versions of events here. And she would probably, well, as her friend, I would like it to have been much more clear than that.
Do you know whether she would welcome the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, Catherine Hudson, investigating further?
I think it has been very emotionally draining, and I would also say that Kate has been keeping the confidence of other people, because, of course, all journalists go to her and say, well, who else is there that has come to you and said, oh, similar things have happened to me, either with the same person or with other people. And she has been keeping a lot of women's confidences. And to be the public face of something is very difficult. I think what many of us would like going forward, I won't speak for Kate on what she thinks of that, but I think what many of us would like going forward is a better system for making complaints about, well, in politics generally.
Some media went after Kate Maltby, really on the attack, claiming at one point, for example, that her parents were ashamed of her.
Yes, I mean, that's absolutely horrifying, and it was incredibly cruel, that. Of course, it is completely untrue. Her parents were very supportive. She had told them at the time. They have come out, that's why their statement last night was very much a rebuttal of that piece. But to print that, you know, your parents are ashamed of you and embarrassed about it all, I mean, is really very, very unfair on anyone, and a very cruel thing to write. But there were many cruelties of the things that have been written about her. I mean, the idea as well that any woman who is brave enough to put her head above the parapet must be an attention seeker. I mean, we've really got to quash those things.
Now, something which must exercise second source, your campaign group, is that actually when you think of Mark Garnier and Damian Green, the two senior MP ministers who have been talked about here, no judgment was made about their actual behaviour.
Right, and what we had was this odd thing where they say, well, you know, there's two sides to every story, isn't there? It's sort of effectively what it did. And you thought, well, actually, Mark Garnier was actually admitting that he had done those things. He said, you know, it was interpreted differently. But he hadn't denied the story. And yet we still talk about it as though he's been accused of doing something. Well, I mean, he said he's done it. And in what workplace would it be appropriate, I wonder, to go and tell one of your members of staff to go and buy sex toys? I mean, I wouldn't want to work in that workplace.
Well, thank you very much indeed for coming in. It's very good of you, Ruth. Joining us now from his home in Oxfordshire is someone who has both resigned from Cabinet and been Deputy Prime Minister, the Conservative Lord Michael Heseltine. Lord Heseltine, how big a blow do you think this is to Mrs May and the government generally?
I don't think it'll make a great deal of difference. It's very sad for the people involved, and I think probably for the Prime Minister and Mr Green, there is a personal relationship which will have been stressful. But look, we're dealing with an issue of transcending national importance in the whole Brexit issue. And frankly, one person or another, one shuffle after another, that's not going to play a big part in the outcome of this enormously important issue.
Except on one sense, and that was the balance in Cabinet of Remainers and Leavers. And as I think we heard from Michael Crick, Damian Green was regarded as a pretty ferocious Remainer. Should he be replaced by another Remainer? Are you concerned about the balance of power inside the Cabinet?
Well, you see, I think that, I mean, I did know Damian well. He is a Remainer, but he was very much in support of the Prime Minister, with whom he had a long personal friendship. And so, frankly, he was not in the Cabinet acting on one side or another. He was acting to preserve a balance, as I understand it. Look, I mean, I wasn't there, what do I know? But I don't think that the Prime Minister will have a problem in maintaining the present divisions, because that's the essence in the Cabinet. They're there, they're represented at the top level of the Cabinet, and unless she starts sacking people, which I don't think she'll do, that division will remain.
Well, now, it's invidious to ask somebody who has been Deputy Prime Minister this question, but can she manage without one?
Oh, yes.
You mean it's not much of a job?
No, you know, deputy prime ministers are not automatically part of the scene, and when they are, they're very different characters. Some are immensely powerful and are potential rivals to the prime minister. Others see the role as being immensely important to support the prime minister, and others are there without perhaps having a great impact on the actual manoeuvring of the cabinet. They're just there to do a supportive job. So it's very much a situation that you take or you leave. It is not a fundamental part. You couldn't do without a chancellor. You can easily do without a deputy prime minister.
If you look back in history, this has been quite a year for the Prime Minister. I mean, she's lost a majority. She's lost 3 cabinet ministers. Is she kept in power by Brexit?
Yes, that is the reality. But, I mean, she made the choice. I mean, she is a Remainer. She campaigned to remain. She made a very articulate speech in April 2016, every word of which I agree with. And she somehow finds it possible now, in a very black and white way, to say we're going to have a Brexit. I find that very difficult.
Do you think that we will leave Europe?
If you're a betting person, which I'm not, you would bet that we are. But you wouldn't put a lot of money on it, and I think as the days and the months go by, you would put less. But I tell you, John, my problem is so simple, that I believe Brexit is such a disaster for this country, that my wish is to see Brexit fail. But I have to be very careful that I don't allow the wish to cloud the judgment. So when you put to me the question you do, is it going to fail? I have to be very careful that I give you a rational, reasoned view. So at the moment it is on course, but public opinion is switching. I think it will switch more. And as I think the details become clearer, more people in Parliament will say, no, this is something we can't put up with.
Lord Heseltine.
At the moment, progress is being made by fudge, not by decision.
Lord Heseltine, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christian.